slides are unique. I did them just for you guys. I thought Mead Unraveled was a good title. And if you guys have feedback after we're done of how I can make it better or things that I left out that I need to put in here, let me know so I can improve for others. I've been a home brewer. I grew up in Washington State, went to Ballard High School, spent 21 years in the Army, came back home about 3 years ago, and most of the great mead makers in the country are out of the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. Anybody not heard of Ken Schramm? Ken Schramm wrote a book called The Complete Mead Maker, and if you know anybody who makes mead in the country, they own that book. And in fact, Ken just opened his own commercial meadery about a month ago. Yeah.
I mean, are you talking about the local Seattle guy?
No, it's not. When I say Ken Schramm up here, they're like, "Oh, the newscaster does mead." Yeah. No, different Ken Schramm. And
Michael Jackson. The same problem. Michael Jackson. No. He did beer too. But Ken's from he's from like the Michigan, Illinois area, and 7 of the last 8 mead makers of the year are all from the Minneapolis, St. Paul homebrew circles.
Really?
The article that I talked about from Kurt Stock, Kurt taught me everything I know about mead. He's a 2-time mead maker of the year, and I try to go to their competition back in Minnesota called the Upper Mississippi Mashout, which is the country's 2nd largest beer competition. It's also one of the toughest mead competitions because the best mead makers are there. And I go there, and last year I went there and judged and competed just because I want to see how good my stuff is. I take it to those guys because they've got great judges, they've got great mead makers, and they know what the hell they're doing. And if you looked at my write-up in Zymergy, the last issue of Zymergy, where they did my write-up for Mead Maker of the Year, I thank all of those guys. I called them all out by name because those guys help me make my mead better, and they're very, very forthcoming about their information, and they kind of take the position that if I share my IPA recipe with you, the only thing I ask, if you figure out a way to make it better, you let me know so I can make my beer better too. So my mead journey started in the Cincinnati 2009 National Homebrew Conference. That was the first National Homebrew Conference I went to, and the Minnesota boys and girls gave this big mead presentation. And like many of you probably have a perception right now that you need to sit on mead for 4 or 5 years before it's worth a damn. This mead is, I pulled this out of one of my fermenters today. It has been less than 3 weeks fermenting, and I think you'll understand, I think you'll get my point that you don't have to sit on it that long when we're done here. And I don't want to be a winemaker. I didn't want to be a winemaker. I wanted to be a beer maker. I've been a home brewer for almost 19 years now, and I never really liked big, huge beers like Russian Imperial Stouts that I had to sit on for years and years and years. I want to make great beer and have my cellar full of great beer and drink the snot out of it, and then make more. So I went to this mead presentation, and they went through the whole, here's the staggered nutrient additions, which I'll talk about in a minute, and these other ways to improve your mead. And then they had like 13 meads all around the auditorium we were in, and almost all of them were less than 3 months old. There was like a key lime pie mead, there was a margarita mead, there was traditional meads, and I'm under the theory that if it tastes good in a pie, it will taste good in a mead. Last year I won for the best mead in the state with a rhubarb mead. Nice. It tastes like rhubarb pie. So, and as we go through this, if you have any questions, just shout them out. I kind of look at this more as kind of a, me leading a discussion rather than, me going wah, 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 wah through a bunch of slides. So,
What is mead? Has anybody ever made a mead? Okay. Lately? Okay. Mead is simply honey, water, and yeast. It's the world's oldest alcoholic beverages. It's the world's oldest alcoholic beverage. You know, somehow they got some wild yeast in their honey, and it sat, and they drank it, and felt lightheaded, and said, "Oh my God, it was given to us by the gods." Awesome. And then they figured out, no, there's little critters in there making that happen, and they started doing it deliberately. But you can put in fruit and spices and other components in your mead too. A traditional mead or a trad is just honey, yeast, and water. And 2 years ago, I took first place in the country with a mead that was honey, yeast, and water. So my processes are pretty sound as far as what I'm doing. And once again, I give all the boys and girls in Minneapolis, St. Paul props for helping me to get to where I am as far as my mead making. I'm on slide 3 now, types of mead.
So for that traditional mead, does that one actually take a lot longer to ferment or
Nope.
to?
Nope. My mead is 1 month in the primary, 1 month in the secondary. I normally hit it with some super clear, and I'm done. And it's ready to drink. It's ready to compete. At 2 months, the mead I won National Mead Maker of the Year with, which was part this and part a rhubarb mead, they were less than 6 months old.
And they're not too fusel at that point. I mean, when we're doing those short turnarounds, it's not fusel at all.
Not when you do your temperature.
Okay. Because all the meat I've had has been very, very fusel. So that's what I'm curious about.
When you taste this one, that one might be a little warm. We'll see. When you taste this one and you taste this one, these are both over 19%, and they drink like grape juice.
Really? Wow.
Dangerous.
It's ass kicking wonderful.
Okay.
What does fusel mean?
Hot alcohol.
High alcohol,
Oh,
like
okay.
you know,
Like vodka.
like vodka or something's got that
Okay.
burny, like a high alcohol beer will sometimes have if it doesn't sit long enough.
Yeah.
It'll have that fusel to it.
It's all about temperature control.
Okay.
It's all about temperature control. I do my primary fermentation. I prefer to do it about 61. Right now, my utility room this time of year is about 62 or 63.
Okay.
It's getting closer to 61.
So do you look at the temperature of the mead as it heats up as it's fermenting, or you just keep the room at 61 and assume that?
I keep the room at 61,
Okay.
and the meat itself is probably going to be more like 64 maybe, because it's going to, with all the yeast doing their thing,
Yep.
those billions of suckers in there collide and are going to generate some heat.
Yep.
So the different types of meat are traditional meat, which is, once again, as I said, just honey, yeast, and water. That's it. A melomel, which is a fruit mead. And if you look in the BJCP style guidelines, they break it down into 3 types. A piment, which is made with grapes. And what I normally do if I'm making a piment, I make a traditional and I make a wine. In fact, my Liebfrau Melch, which is a German table wine piment, which was the first piment I ever made last year, took gold in Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a couple guys there that had really.
You blended it?
Yes, because here's why. If you take your, especially if you're doing something like a sizer or which is part cider, part mead. If you take a cider and just put honey in it, you're going to get something. You're going to get something. Well, guess what? What you got is what you've got. What I do is I will make a really good, like for instance, my piment. I use a wine yeast to do. So I use the same yeast in both, in the mead and the wine. And then I go, okay, both of these are pretty good. And normally what happens is the wine goes really dry, and the yeast I try to keep on the really, really sweet side. So when they blend, I'm somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the medium. And I find that most of the meads, you can make them, big and sweet and syrupy, but I find they're most poundable at just like a medium sweet.
They're kind of like how a lot of the sour guys are doing that too, because they're starting a sour and it's soured a year, but then they're blending it with a newer to maintain some of the sweetness because you're dry and tart, kind of the same thing.
A little bit different in there because you're going to generate. Now I I'm gonna do something like that. I've got another piment I'm gonna make. I got a wine kit, and I've got my yeast, and I've been trying to do it for about a month now. But I have a little bit of my piment left from last year.
Oh, so you're saying you're starting
that I put on some wood. That I put on some wood, and it got a little too woody by itself. But I just let it sit. I've got maybe a gallon of it. So I'm going to try to make this again. And last year I only made 3 gallons. So this, no, I guess I made 6. So this year I'm going to make it again and make like 10 gallons, and then see if I can blend it back with some of the wood age too, to give it kind of that complexity that they get out of Chardonnays and whatnot. Sorry, I digress a little bit here. But the bottom line is this: if you've got 2 good bases, if you're trying to make a piment or a sizer, you can make anything. In fact, you don't even have to blend them when you package them. You could keep them entirely separate and go, you know what? I'm going to blend them when I drink it, if you want. I mean, it depends, what you're trying to do. If you're trying to compete it, or just trying to have something in your cellar that's yummy.
So the way you're blending them, though, is you're baking 2 different batches at the same time.
Correct.
So one's not aged quite a bit more than the other.
They could be.
Okay.
They could be. Now, for instance, I did something with the mead. I had a cherry mead that I couldn't get right. My in-laws are from Michigan, so I brought back 40 pounds on the plane, packed in dry ice of Michigan tart cherries.
Oh yeah.
And I'm thinking I'm going to make this cherry mead. Didn't taste very good. Just the tartness. I put I used some Bings, I used some Rainiers, and I used some of the Michigan tarts. And I bottled some, and it just didn't work right. So I ended up hitting it with some black currants. I had a couple gallons of it. I hit it with some black currants, and it kind of made the tartness of the tartness of the black currants kind of made the tartness of the cherries pop a little more. So it was pretty good. And then I took it with one of my house meads. They're similar to this that you'll have today, and I blended it with that. So I ended up with this dark berry thing going on with this really tart fruit thing on top of it. I think that's the best mead in my cellar right now.
That sounds good.
So, and that was one that I blended at different ages, but it wasn't necessarily intentional. I was just trying to find a good place for this other mead that I had. Normally, if I'm doing a sizer or a piment, I'm not planning enough to go, I'm going to do this, and in 6 months I'm going to do this. I'm just, it's cider season right now. It's toward the end of cider season. Good time to get pressed apples.
Yeah.
So you make a good cider, and then, and maybe you make 5 gallons of cider, and you take 2 gallons and you blend it with the mead, just shits and giggles, and you still got 3 gallons. So, depending on how you want to set your cellar up, but you have a lot more control if you blend them post fermentation. Bottom line, and if they're a little dry, just back sweeten with a little honey. Yeah, I didn't have back sweetening on here. But I'll make sure we talk about this. One of the things I was hoping this was going to be too dry today. It's not. I tasted it a little bit. I didn't taste much. I smelled it. You have a coffee filter by any chance? Or do you just have a Keurig like everybody else in the world now?
Yeah, I don't drink coffee. So.
Okay, no worries. Well, because this has some floaties in it, but it's just fruit. It's just chunks of fruit. I mean, I just literally just dug in into my fermenter today with a 2-cup measuring cup and threw it, and I didn't get a chance to really strain it. It's not going to hurt you. It just looks kind of funny compared to the rest of the stuff. It's pretty.
Mead Maker.
So. So I talked about so a piment is made with grapes. A sizer is made with apples. And once again, you can make them together. You could make a cider with honey and call it a sizer, or a wine, any type of wine you could think of, and add honey, and it would theoretically be a piment. I think it's supposed to be over 50% of the fermentables is honey, officially, but nobody can tell that when you're drinking it. And in fact, I have a cider that kind of turned out a little funky, and I just threw a little bit of honey in it to sweeten it up, and I think I'm going to enter it as a
sour.
No, I'm going to enter it as a apple Jolly Rancher mead. Because it tastes just like apple Jolly Ranchers.
Oh my gosh. There you
Like the
go.
green
Yes.
Apple?
Yeah, like the green apple ones. But what I'm going to do, and it's really a cider, But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw enough honey in it so you get that little bit of honey character. Judges don't know. You can't. I mean, nobody's got a.
What are they going to do?
Yeah.
Separate it out?
Yeah. They're gonna say, "Oh, you didn't do that, right?" They're either gonna buy what I'm selling or they're not. And
Travels well.
and then there's an other fruit mead, which is like these are other fruit meads, because they're not grapes, they're not, and most of the fruit meads are other fruit meads, whether it's strawberries, kiwis, raspberries, blackberries, and then there's also oops, I gotta get in here. I gotta type one here. There's also a oh no, that's right. No, it's not. It's there's a spiced mead as well. How's a spiced mead called? I should know this.
Speed.
No. I'll think of it here in a second. Actually, where's my? It's on my. So we got BJCP style guidelines on their
I was
phones.
trying to
Yeah.
Thanks.
Except
It's over there, though.
my screen's cracked. Give me a minute. Flip it around this way.
So, and everything else that doesn't fall under those categories
There's other meat.
ends up as an other mead. Like if you had something that was spiced and fruit, it would be other mead.
Or wood, other meat.
Yep,
Methylene.
thank you. Yeah, that was supposed to say methylene there, not melomel. That was working too quick.
Methylene?
Braggot or Brago?
Methylene. Yeah, oh, that's right. I didn't talk about braggot. Yeah, braggot is part beer, part mead.
Have you ever done one of those?
And once again, I have not found too many braggots that I've found that desirable. and once again, it's people take a big beer and they put a bunch of honey in it and they get what they get. I think some of the better braggots are you find a beer that you like, you find a mead that you like, and things that you think are complementary. Like for instance, I've had a braggot that was a big IPA that was kind of sweetened up with honey that seemed okay. What was another one that I came across that I liked? Like a triple. Sometimes
see
triples can be a
that.
little sweet
Yeah.
and be a little boozy. So, yeah. So, braggots are tough because there's. Now the cool part about braggots, I mean, it's vast. You know what I mean? Whatever, things you could think of that you want your beer to taste like and want a meat to taste like, you could blend the two. Try to get something cool, but I probably judged braggots 5 times, and of the 20 braggots that I've had, I've probably thought 2 of them were, that I would have finished the sample.
I feel like that finished the
Same thing.
sample.
It's supposed to be 51% of your fermentables are honey. That's relative. You know what I mean? It's how are you gonna get the beer character and the mead character? I think it's easier to get a wine character and a mead character and a cider character and a mead character to blend and marry into try to something that's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts type of thing. Braggots is just hard. We've talked about it. I mean, I've talked about it a lot with friends that are hardcore brewers to kind of figure out what their ideas on braggots are. But I can say of the I bet I know 200 brewers from around the country. And every other thing on that list, if you said who makes the best this, who makes the best sours, who makes the best, I'd have an opinion. Braggot, I have no idea. I don't know anybody that I go, yeah, that's braggot dude. Right, just braggot dude. Like you guys know Mark Joy out of Brew?
Mm-hmm.
He's the pepper guy. That guy can make beer with freaking peppers. He makes some weirdness beers, but his pepper beers are awesome. And yeah, in fact, Sam Adams did their long shot, and they did only specialty beers. He finished in the top 10 in the country. Got like 6,000 beers. Yeah, his pepper wheat, I think it is. It's really good. So now I'm on slide 4, mead strength. So when I describe mead, a lot of times I will use the analogy the properties of mead are like the four legs of a stool. Okay, and the four legs are alcohol, sweetness, tannins or structure, kind of like you think of wine, and acidity. And that stool should be balanced. It shouldn't be one where one leg is where your chair's clicking back and forth. And it could be a very short stool, meaning it could be low in alcohol and low sweetness, low acid, which is kind of up in the hydromel range or down in the hydromel range. Or it could be a big, tall stool that's super high in alcohol, but you need a ton of sweetness and a ton of acid and structure to balance that out. Those are the ones I make. I make really, really, really tall meads. I just figure if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.
What are the four things? Sweetness, tannins, structure.
Tannins and structure being the same.
Okay.
Sweetness, alcohol, and acidity are the other three.
What is the source of
Well, in my meads, the source of tannins, I use lots of berries. We are a land of wonderful berries, so I don't de-seed my raspberries and my blackberries. So you get a lot of structure. Sometimes I'll throw in blueberries that won't come out in the flavor, but blueberry skins have tons of tannin, so you get a lot of structure that way.
Grapes, tons of tannins.
Yeah, and grapes have lots of natural tannins as well. But other things in mead don't necessarily. So,
I just think like you get your simple basic mead, there's all sorts of tannin there.
well, that's why what I've been experimenting with is throwing in wood. Like I wanted. I mean, I enter stuff all over the country, so I've got all kinds of weird shit, and I guess most of it's useful. But like I won some French oak spirals, so I just threw one of my meats one day just went. I wonder how that's going to turn out. So for some of the traditionals, I think you can do the same thing with like Chardonnay and stuff, which most of us don't own an oak barrel, but you can use oak chips or oak spirals or oak shavings or other types of wood. I like American medium toast for my beers, but I like the French for my meats.
What about hops?
I've never made any with hops. My favorite hopped mead is done by the Redstone guys out of Colorado. They've got a really good. It's like an IPA mead.
Wow.
It's pretty good. You see, and that's where. Well, I stand corrected.
That's not considered a bracket.
It is not officially a braggot. If I had their beer, if I had their mead, and was going to put it in a competition, I would enter it as a braggot and say it was part beer, but it's not. It is a 100% honey fermentable with hops.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what we're making. That's our first mead, friends.
One
So-
gallon of the batch.
I'm on slide 5 now, honey varieties. There is a 100-page booklet that is on bjcp.org. I don't know if you've ever been there or not. But in their mead section for their mead resources, it's the mead study guide, and they have in there probably 35, 40 different types of honey that people could get from all over the country. What I did is kind of focus on the local honeys that we can get here fairly easily. I mean, you can get other things too, but clover, obviously, or wildflower, same. It's just a varietal honey where the bees are, eating a little bit of everything. Fireweed, that's where a lot of the bees. Fireweed is kind of a scrub type weed or plant. A lot of people like using fireweed in Washington. I guess that's probably why I kick their ass every time. Anything that's been made with a fireweed. So those people in love with it, God bless them. But I think it's a substandard honey. People like it for certain things because it throws some certain flavors. But
Is it a lower cost honey, and do you think that's maybe why people use it?
I don't think so, because I think you can get some real premium fireweed honey. I just don't like the flavors that it imparts. That's why I brought some different types of honey to see if you can guys can catch the
Fireweed tastes
subtleties.
really dirt and earthy.
Did you
Yes.
bring any fireweed by any chance?
I've never purchased any. I will never.
Just to show us how bad it is.
Not
Little
to
farmer's
bring
market
and
taste.
share with you.
You like us that much, Herb.
I would.
I
I'm just
appreciate
gonna.
that.
I'm just gonna steer you in the right direction.
Guy's moral fiber even around it.
It's like showing up here with Budweiser. Come on.
It's definitely not as
So-
sweet as a blackberry honey.
Cannoli?
So here's an interesting honey for you to use, mustard honey.
Maybe, but once again,
I don't even know if you can buy it.
I can't imagine what I would make 5 gallons of that I would want to drink 5 gallons of. You know what I mean?
The reason I bring that up is my boss trades land with other farmers, and it's mustard seed, and they have beehives out there.
Ah.
So I asked the bee guys, what on earth do you do with mustard honey? Now, that's our winter stock, that's what
Right.
we feed our bees with. They don't sell it.
Okay.
But I just like, if you ever wanted a really weird-ass challenge,
I've got the weirdest fucking honey you've ever seen in your life. and my honey guy, that's from 2 years ago. My honey guy, I bet still has 2, 100-gallon drums of that. If anybody's interested. But yeah, we'll talk about that here in a minute.
What's the ratio that determines that it's blackberry honey?
Well, let me get through this, and I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover that question for you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to cover that question for you.
industrial lot.
So
It's blackberry honey.
you can find blueberry honey up here. You can find blackberry and raspberry. The last couple years, the blackberries and raspberries kind of popped simultaneously. So, like, this blackberry honey is actually part blackberry, part raspberry. And this, I'm sorry. This blackberry is part blackberry, part blueberry. And then that 2 years, those popped at the same time this year. And last year, it was part raspberry, part blackberry. So, the good blackberry blossom honey is going to tend to stay liquid. I mean, it is not super liquidy, but it's not hard. You know what I mean? It's not like my raspberry blossom right now is hard as a rock. And that's okay. It's just a pain in the ass to take 40 gallons of it and stick it in your bathtub and change the water 10 times till it finally gets warm enough. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
if you come out where I work out by Edison and Bow, you can see blackberry, raspberry, blueberry fields all like really close. So
Right.
the bee guys will put the hives here, but to tell you what, it might be in a blackberry field, but it's right next to a raspberry field. And just down the road is blueberry field. So
be careful when they say it's this or it's that. I ask a lot of questions. I know my bee guys pretty well. My bee guys like my mead, so they're going to be honest with me because they want to make sure I get my mead right. So that when they're saying when they get their cut of my mead, it's the right stuff.
So it depends upon the season, though. When the flowers come out, that's how the mead gets identified,
Correct.
or the honey gets identified.
Correct. Because normally the at least where I get mine up in Linden, the blackberries pop first, then the raspberries pop. Down here, where I live in Oak Harbor, the raspberries pop first, then the blackberries pop. So, it depends on where they're bringing their bees and honey, and so I would say around here in Washington, our clover and wildflower honey are normally pretty good honeys, and good possibility is, part of the wildflower is blackberries and raspberries and other things that throw some wonderful character. You can also find apple blossom honey. That's a lot. My buddies get a lot of that from Eastern Washington. I like it. I've never made mead with it, but I've had some mead with it. It's pretty good. Some of the premium honeys that I will send off for, which are in California or Florida, is orange blossom honey, and I've got some orange blossom honey here.
James is like, yeah.
And this is what I won with. This is what I won in the traditional category 2 years ago with orange blossom, and most of the boys in Arizona in Minneapolis will tell you that if you brew a mead with orange blossom honey, you probably should get docked 4 points right off the bat because it's just unfair. To brew with this honey against the other honey strips.
Really? It's that much.
It's
Very
fucking phenomenal. Well, I have two orange blossom meads here
Okay.
that are actually like
Yes.
4 years old, I think.
Oh my
so
gosh.
you're lucky. I just happen to have.
Oh my.
I didn't have enough to put them in competition, so I'm like, yep, okay, we're gonna drink. And then there's another honey called Tupelo honey, which Tupelo honey, I think many would say that that's the best honey you can get. And it is a wonderful utility honey. Now, what I've found, and it generally ferments clean. It might throw a little bit of vanilla, maybe a little bit of lemon character, just really, really faint. I find that if you can get, as pure as you can blackberry blossom honey from Washington, I prefer that over Tupelo now. Just because that's what I make my raspberry with, that's what I make my chai tea with, that's what I make. If I want something, and let me I'll knit back my mead story as I go through this. So I leave Cincinnati saying, hey, I can make mead that maybe I could drink in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. That's okay, 6 months is okay, I can do that. So I go home and I order some orange blossom honey and I order some Tupelo honey. It's not cheap, get what you pay for, put, just like your beer, you put good ingredients in, you're gonna get, good product out. So I make these two really wonderful meads right out of the gate. Followed what Kurt Stock said to do, called Kurt, emailed Kurt, talked me off the ledge a few times, and I'm bringing it to my wife, who thinks that my beer's defect. My wife will probably tell you that my brewing is my only, positive personality trait I have. And at least I got something going for me. And that's my only redeeming quality. So I'm pretty proud of this. It's maybe 6 weeks old or whatever. I walk in and my wife is entering the room. I hand it to her. She gets about this far from her mouth. Winces, sticks it in the back in the middle of my chest, doesn't break stride, walks straight out of the room, and as she's leaving goes, I don't fucking like honey. I'm like, we've been married like 8 years. I don't know if she likes honey. I don't know. I guess it never came up because she never ever had it. Or anything. I don't know. I didn't know that. So, and both of those meads were winning awards in decent competitions, like at 3 months old. I mean, they were good meads. They're solid. In fact, I think that one of the ones in there is one of the original ones I ever made. And so, fast forward 3 months, we're at the KC Beermeisters. It used to be the big Midwest Championship. Now, from that competition has spawned up Mississippi Mash Out and some other ones. But most of those big competitions in the Midwest will all say that they all learned what they know from the KC Beermeisters. And I happen to be living in Kansas City at the time. So, our guest speaker for the competition was Ken Schramm. Mr. National Mead. And he's got, we have pictures of, he's got a mead that's very similar to this, called Heart of Darkness. And we have pictures of my wife drinking because it doesn't have any honey character. It's all, and he has some real special cherries on his. Because he's got some farm area, and literally in an E.F. Hutton moment, looking at me, going, "If you can make this, you can get laid anytime." So I said, I'm moving back to Washington in a year, and I'm going into the lab because I can get better berries than anywhere else in the country, right here. And so none of these berry meads, you might find some honey character if you're looking for it, but if you found it, it's not intentional. I mean, my intent is to make my meads with no honey character whatsoever. And the guys that are good mead judges know that that's perfectly fine. And a lot of times I'll use the blackberry blossom honey, which will ferment out clean. I also like to use raspberry blossom, which will ferment out a little bit fruity. But if you're making a big fruity mead, it works. Yeah, a lot of times I will blend those two. So I get a little bit of fruity, but most of it's clean.
Wait, what were the two you said you'll blend?
Blackberry blossom and raspberry blossom.
Oh, okay.
In fact, this one is just a raspberry blossom. This one, the 12-8, I think is a raspberry, half blackberry.
So what if instead of blending the two batches, what if you just blend your honey with?
No, that's what I do. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I'll use part blackberry blossom, part
There you
raspberry
go.
blossom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, in the same batch.
In the same batch.
There we go.
Yeah.
Have you ever had maple honey?
You know, there's a guy I was in the Whidbey Island Homebrew store, and Jeremy Allison, who's one of the owners there, who's vying for Washington Homebrewer of the Year this year. He's in second. Him and Jonathan Perriman are way ahead of everybody else. So he asked me to come over, because I'm a halfway decent judge, and we went through like 25 beers of his to see which 15, I think it was 15 or 10 or whatever they capped for how many you can enter in Novemberfest. And this guy walks in from Coopville, who's like the Coopville hunt guy. He's kind of a douche, but he wanted like $4 a pound for his fucking honey. Well, the bees are dying. I'm like, well, be a better beekeeper, dude. Bees are dying. Yeah, they're dying in Alberta, Canada. You know what? That's not affecting your prices. But he had maple honey. He had maple honey, and we're thinking about buying a bucket of it just to play with it. But I don't think it's something. I would like to be a big boy mead maker someday.
It's not viable for a big boy.
So I am. When I'm looking at meads, I'm not looking at trick meads. I'm looking at something that's commercially viable, that I can make, you know, a 50-gallon batch or a 5,000-gallon batch.
Well, my experience was I bought it from a guy up in Concrete. I can't remember. Buzz About Town, I think, is the name of his honey company. And it seemed to me like by itself it was kind of, but in something it would have been really good. I just was curious if you'd ever experimented with it.
I've never used it. We are on the verge of. In fact, my buddy Tim, who may show up here, may not, he's coming out to my house tonight because we made a collaboration mead, and then we're going to package it tonight. But we're probably going to have that discussion because I told Tim, hey, I can get my hands on some maple, and he's like, I might be interested in going in on a bucket of that. So we're going to kind of figure out, you know, maybe we'll make a
Maple bacon mead.
Yeah, I was thinking, like a breakfast mead of some type, you know, eggs and cheese, hash browns.
All I know is it has to be better than that voodoo donut maple.
Oh my
bacon.
god, that was awful.
That was good. Come on.
No.
Does anybody have any honey questions before I move on to nutrients?
How do you get it into your fermenter? How do you heat it up and
I do not heat my honey at all.
we'll warm it up so it's liquid or whatever.
Yeah, I just warm it up by like my blackberry blossom tends not to coagulate, not to harden. The orange blossom I use, and that's a. I have a theory that might be Tim right now. I have a theory that the better your meat is, the better your honey is, the less apt it is to harden. And speak of the devil, were your ears burning, brother?
No.
We were just talking about you. Everybody, this is Tim Lieber.
Hi, everybody.
I know Tim from Kansas City.
Okay.
Tim and I were in the first BJCP judging class I was ever in. Tim was also in that class. We knew each other. We weren't really friends then.
Who scored higher again?
I'm sure Tim probably did. I just test better. He's way smarter on this. And then I found out from a mutual friend that Tim had moved to Washington, and convinced him to come all the way up to Seattle and join our little club in the Beer Renegades of Everett, Washington, which now I have a club in Whidbey I can plug into. But yeah, so Tim, how long have you been here, Tim? 3 months?
3 years. 3
No,
years last June.
No, but Tim's first competition, he won Washington Mead Maker of the Year.
Oh,
And you're very
He won the Mead and Cider Cup.
that was a Mead and Cider Cup, yeah.
Yeah, he
in like October, so I've been here like 3 months.
That's why, yeah. So yeah, and everybody's like, who the hell is this guy?
People thought I was you under a fake name.
Care for beer?
Yes. Saying about the Pope?
Catholic, right?
Yeah.
So now you were saying you don't heat your meads because I've seen this discussion. Do you
You know,
boil it? Do you not?
I know a bunch of commercial guys that do. A lot of them heat it up to 180, just to kind of kill, kind of almost basically to pasteurize it. And there's a lot of commercial guys that don't. I find that if you heat up your honey, you're going to drive some of those aromatics off. So if you don't need to heat it up,
But aren't there
Well,
just
here's-
wild
you know-
spores and stuff in there that if you don't heat it up, you're risking having
I'll take some.
funky...
He's like, yep.
you're gonna pitch an aggressive yeast in your mead. And what I'm going to talk about right now is called the staggered nutrient addition
Yeah.
concept, and that's going to help make sure that promote the health of the yeast you want to take over. It's a numbers game, you know, because there's a few little spores in there in everything we do, but you know, just you got to make sure you get the numbers in your favor. So
This is probably a really weird question, but I'm asking anyway.
Sure.
I take a little local honey every day for my allergies. There's
Okay.
something with the pollen, I get sick
cool.
less, I have less
it's
allergies.
good for you.
Does that come through, if you don't heat it and you ferment it, do you know, is all the pollen still in it?
I don't know.
It's a histamine
Yes.
reaction. So.
Yes and no.
See, that's why I brought Tim along. I don't have a fucking idea. I know how to manage the yeast. I don't know what's in the honey.
I make it, I drink it, that's that, right?
Yes and no. A lot of it's going to fall out with the yeast, but not all of it will. Actually, it is a FDA requirement that if it's called honey, it has to have pollen in it. So you might see something online about most honey sold in stores is not honey. It's because they filtered all the pollen out to make it nice and jewel clear. Some of that does carry through, but not all of it does.
Okay.
But if you make mead and it sits, no matter how clear it is, no matter what you do just to clarify it, if it sits, it's going to drop something. So there's still some pollen and stuff in there.
Cool.
You gotta drink a lot of it.
So now you're going to meet instead of honey.
So
I have to remain drunk for my allergies. It's my allergy.
If my allergies were...
okay, one of the things that Mindy was talking about earlier was many meads being fusel. Okay, and part of that, a couple things with that. One, it really comes down to your yeast being stressed out. It really comes down to your yeast being stressed out. So that's temperature. That's giving the yeast the things they need to do their job. Unlike barley-based fermentable liquid, honey-based fermentable liquid does not have all of the natural nutrients that the yeast need to build their cell walls, to do all of their enzymatic activity that they do to turn whatever your sweet liquid is into CO2 and alcohol and something that tastes good. So what you do, and there's a couple other things that if there's too much CO2 in there, that it also causes some problems, and I tend to think that it gets a little acidic. So the most important thing you need to make mead is a drill and a wine whip. Every day,
Wine whip.
you degas it for like the first 10 or 12 days. I do it twice a day. I've got a rhubarb mead going right now. I degassed it this morning before I came to see you guys. I will degas it again tonight.
So you add your mixture of your staggered yeast detergent and then just...
And basically...
Degas, then add the stagger.
There we go, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
You won't forget that.
Yeah. I've done.
You'll only forget it once.
No, that's not true. I normally throw my nutrient in, then I degas. But
The one time I forgot it looked like Mentos and Diet Coke.
So be careful. So basically, now Kurt, if you read this, what Kurt Stock says is basically for a 5-gallon batch, you're going to mix 1 teaspoon of Fermate K and 2 teaspoons of DAP, and then basically you're going to add a quarter of that every other day. And now he basically says you add a quarter of it to begin with. And you can get this online, and you can take this home with you too. There's a bunch of copies. There's a bunch of copies of this up there.
I didn't get that one out, sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's only like 3 copies of it.
There's 10.
Oh, there's 10,
out there.
okay.
So,
You want?
I won't
So yeah, if you came as a couple, take one as a couple. But basically, he adds it at 24 hours, adds it at 48 hours, and then after 30% of the sugar has been depleted. I tend to follow a little different path. In fact, he's very curious of how I've changed mine up, because basically what I do is add, and I add more nutrient than Kurt does. And remember I said the first mead I ever made, I talked to Kurt, and basically I added 4 times the nutrient that Kurt adds. Because I thought we had to add that every time I added it, and he's supposed to break. But so he's like, oh my god! And if you add too much nutrient, a lot of times you can tell if there's too much nutrient in a mead because it'll taste like Flintstones chewable vitamins.
Oh.
Yeah, it will. It'll taste like Flintstones. And sometimes it's just faint, but it's there. I mean, I can pick it up. Tim and I will just go, yep, too much nutrient. I mean, let's pick it up like that. But I didn't have nutrient in my mead. I didn't have a nutrient flavor, even though I added 4 times the amount of nutrient that Kurt said I should. So I probably use twice as much as Kurt does. And I normally use a 50-50 split of DAP and Ferment K. And I might throw a little bit of yeast energizer in at the beginning. Anybody know what GoFirm is?
Yeah, I've kept been able to find it. I've talked to my homebrew store about it.
Whidbey Island has it.
Do they have it?
Yep.
And I got it from Northern Brewer.
Yeah. I used to have to get it from Northern Brewer until my local guys.
Now, I work off Goldie in Oak Harbor for a company, and I saw the sign saying that the homebrew shop's right there now. Did they move from downtown?
Yeah, they moved from downtown there.
Okay, I was going to say, this is way too small of a town to have 2 homebrew shops.
No. It's the same. They need more space.
Okay.
I mean, originally that was out of.
Was that recent?
It was originally out of what's his name's garage, and then in a month we had like, and it's awesome because they have all the grains that you have to go to go to Northern Brewer because nobody else in the state stocks. They stock all those grains. That was their original concept, that we're going to stock all the grains that everybody else is having to go across the country to get.
Like what? Like an example of?
Like Crisp 77 and different
The full
types
line
of
of Byron malts.
Yeah, full line. Nice. Yeah, of the RAR and the Wireman and stuff that you can find here and there.
Carrying me in 3 weird things that you
Yep,
can't.
Yep, it's the Whidbey Island homebrew supply in Oak Harbor.
It's literally like, I drive past it and to work and home every single day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? They also, because I use a lot of White Labs yeast, and I have to go to Kirkland to get it, but I don't like mail order. I don't like mail order in my yeast. So if I'm on the east side, I'll buy my stuff there, and sometimes I get it from Kirkland. It's dead. So I drive all the way back here, and then I spend all that time, and then they fuck me. But
Don't go to that shop anymore, I told you.
but the Whidbey guys, even though they're not stocking as much White Labs as they were, if there's something that White Labs that you need, they'll order for you. You just got to plan an extra week, so it'll take them a week to get it in. But so the key nutrients for mead are dimonium phosphate, and dimonium phosphate has a lot of potassium in it. Is that the one that has a lot of potassium, or is the other one?
That's Ferment K.
Ferment K's got a lot of potassium.
K for potassium.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, see, that's funny. I'm being a scientist. And one of the things, although I didn't talk about it on here, is water. Just like your beer, if you use tap water that has a lot of chloramines in it, you can taste the chlorine, you're going to taste that in your beer. Same thing with your mead. I tend to use bottled water. I don't know how many times somebody's brought me a beer or something and said, man, what's wrong with this? I'm like, you got too many chloramines in your water. And normally before I asked that, I said, hey, if I said give me $4.50 right now, and I could fix this 5-gallon batch of beer, what would you do? I'd give you $10. Well, next time you use bottled water, it costs you $4.50. And you won't have that problem anymore. How much is your time worth? Anybody have any questions on nutrients?
Do you heat your water?
No, what I normally do is I've got a little utility sink in my laundry room, and I will take my gallon jugs of water. I prefer Arrowhead. I've used every type of bottled water that I can get in Oak Harbor, from the commissary to Albertsons to Walmart to Safeway. And I have, that's what I do when I move to a new place. I figure out what the best water is. And I have come to the fact that Arrowhead natural spring water is my go-to water. And it's kind of funny because that's one I tend to use in Kansas City too. Read your fine print on your water. A lot of it's reverse osmosis water, which is fine. Reverse osmosis water tends to take out too many of the nutrients and minerals that yeast need for good development. But if it says reverse osmosis with minerals added for taste, those minerals that they use are the ones that taste good are the same ones that yeast need to do the thing. You don't know how much magnesium and potassium and exactly because they don't tell you what that percentage is. But if the water tastes good, those minerals that make it taste good to the yeast too.
Calcium is a critical yeast nutrient, and we don't talk about it much because it's in the water for the most part. But if you use RO water, you're going to stress out that yeast just like you didn't use nutrient. So you need some minerals.
Deionized water tastes flat. Doesn't taste right.
Which water?
Deionized water.
Yep.
Because it really makes a difference.
Yeah. So
Chlorine will kind of naturally off-gas over time, so a lot
No.
of times it will. Yeah.
Not it. Depends.
Depends if they
Chlorine
use or
will.
chloramine.
Chloramine does not.
Yeah, chlorine will, but chloramine depends on what your city doses their water with. But
Correct.
if you're using chlorine, it'll off-gas and you can let it sit.
What does
for a little while.
Sketch PD use?
I don't know, let's look at the report. But I know Marysville, we
Go
use
home.
chlorine, we use, it's basically chloramine is
Yeah.
what's gonna be in there.
The way to find out is go home, get a mason jar, fill it halfway up with your tap water, set it out on the counter overnight, go back the next day, put the lid on it, shake the crap out of it, smell it. If it smells like a pool, they have chloramines.
Check it out, babe. I stand corrected. Shoot.
Carbon filter your water.
I guess minerals are in the water we have, and I
Carbon
just
filter
learned
will take
that.
it
I
out.
didn't
Well,
know that.
Carbon
most
filter
of
will
the
take it out.
most of the municipal water that we get in Washington, based on the Washington state laws and everything else, is really good. Like most of the greater Seattle area. I mean, most of the guys that come from, when Gordon Strong, who's the best beer judge in the country. In fact, I got to meet Gordon's story here. I can tell you a little bit. But Gordon was talking to the National Homebrew Conference. He's like, you know what, all you people in Seattle, fuck you. And there's a reason. There's a good reason that last year the cider maker of the year, mead maker, and homebrewer of the year are all from Washington State.
Boom.
We've got good
You want to think
stuff
about
to work with.
and coffee
Really
too. I mean, look at the coffee world. Seattle's the mecca, and it's because of water.
Yeah, it's true.
What do you do with your water? I don't mind me asking.
Our
How's that?
Yeah, you finally sent it to me, and I got the general one, but the general one doesn't necessarily have all of the extra tones we're talking about.
We tried.
Double check.
It's an odd thing for my neighborhood.
Okay, I'm on the staggered nutrient addition slide, which is slide 7, I think. So basically,
Mail first did come later. Cool.
So basically, what I do is I take some water and I warm it up. Just like I said, just put it in the sink with hot water. Leave it in there for a half hour or so, just so it helps to dissolve the honey better. You don't have to, but it just takes a while to dissolve honey. It just does. So you stir it up, and then I add my nutrients. I normally add for 5 gallons, I'll add a teaspoon of DAP and a teaspoon of Ferment K, and then just to begin with, I normally whip mine for 5 minutes, just to really, because for instance, my rhubarb mead I made 3 days ago. It hadn't started perking yet, and part of it is that's a big ass mead. I mean, that's probably going to be almost 20% when it ferments out, and it takes, and I didn't use a yeast starter. A lot of times I use a yeast starter when I make a big ass mead like that. This time I didn't have time to do it, so I just did one slap pack, or a lot of times I'll use 2 slap packs, but it just takes a while for all the yeast to multiply, to gather, and to organize before they start doing their thing. I'm guessing probably tonight, and today I'll add a little more tonight I'll add a little more nutrient, and I'm guessing by tomorrow morning it'll be rocking and rolling.
And you whip,
Yes. Oh, sorry.
you whip partially to get to oxygenate it also?
Yes. So basically, to begin with, I'm whipping it to oxygenate it. And I found that instead of doing it for 2 minutes, the first day if I do it for 5, a lot of times it'll go within the first 36 hours.
What about just oxygenating it? Just
You can do that too.
oxygen stone, right?
Yeah. If you got an oxygen stone or you know got a equipment to oxygenate, you know, because you got a fish tank or whatever, knock yourself out. That'll work great. If you do that for your beer, it's going to work for your mead too. I just as long as you know my mead's rocking and rolling, you know, within 96 hours, I'm good.
So don't freak out if I don't get a reaction.
Why is this not working? After about
Day
5
2.
days, I would probably go find some other yeast and pitch some more.
Yeah. You're using for yeast. You're using wine yeast, or using different types of wine yeast or high gravity beer
You know, if you're gonna start just starting out, I would use Lavalin 71B, 69 cents or 96 cents, and a little dry packet. Read the directions. It says you put it in like a quarter cup of warm water first, about 100 degrees to kind of get it going.
Moonlight Meadery, that's all they use.
I know.
Yeah, well,
Which is why Michael knows that my meat is so much fucking better than his. The last 3 times I've been with Michael, he said the same thing. Mark, you can have a job anytime you want. I know.
Going back to honey, have you found any difference between filtered, non-filtered honey?
No, Tim likes non-filtered honey just because of the bee parts and all kinds of stuff
there
in
are bee
there.
bits in it, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot more oomph in there. I don't mind pretty honey. The guy that I get it from tends to put it through a 50 micron filter, so my blackberry blossom and raspberry blossom are really pretty.
Yeah.
But I haven't had any issues one way or another. Tim.
If you can read a newspaper through it, don't buy it.
Kind of like beer.
Yeah, and the simple reason is it's filtered everything out of it. You know, he's talking about this 50 micron filter. There's still a lot of pollen and stuff in there. I use that same honey all the time.
Yeah, I popped one of mine. There was a full bee in.
Yeah.
In mine the other day when I popped it, I was like, ooh.
You don't want it crystal clear. Because they also, to get it through the filters that fine, they have to heat it up.
Playing with it, just like
And if you can smell it in the air, that's all your aromas
You lost it.
you're losing.
Okay.
That makes sense. I haven't thought about that.
That's why.
So basically what I do is I degas at least 2 minutes every day for the first 10 days. And I add nutrients every day or every other day so basically days 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. Sometimes if I've got like a 12-gallon mead and it's still just cranking, every 3/4 of a second, I've degassed all the way to like 15 days. And my theory is once I get between like 10 or 15 seconds between bubbles, I probably want to stop introducing, extra oxygen to it. But, once again, you're asking those, especially when we're talking, because I will use 22, sometimes 24 pounds of meat in a 5-gallon batch of honey. And that's just a big ass meat. It's a big, and then I'll throw 12 pounds of berries in there with it. Which, so.
She's like, here you go.
You'll see why here in a minute.
You said 25 pounds
When I
of honey,
shut the
right?
fuck
You
up
said
and we
meat,
can.
right?
I'm sure that's what he
You
meant.
said honey,
Here-
honey, not meat. You said 22 to 25.
20
honey in 5
to
ounces.
24 pounds of honey.
He said meat, and I'm like, what?
If I misspoke, then yeah.
That's for 5 pounds?
Not what I said. What I meant.
You said 24 to 28 pounds.
Instead of what I say, I don't know what I mean, not what I say.
That's the biggest I've ever done.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the big. I normally am right around, to get a semi-sweet, I normally around 18 to 19
Yeah, which
pounds per 5 gallons.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll try to make like
20.
5.5, 5.25. And the question came up, what kind of fermenters you use? Since I make a lot of big fruit meads, I like the big plastic buckets.
8-gallon
Yeah, the 8-gallon big ass buckets, because I can put lots of stuff in there.
Lots of room still.
Also, for your fruit, put your fruit in muslin bags.
Easy to
That's
pull.
I have, and you get great fruit character when you puree all your fruit, and then you go to rack that shit, and you waste like 2 gallons of $100 bottle mead. You're like, no. So if you put it in muslin sacks, and you know it's easy to pick up then too when you're degassing it, and also if you're making fruit meads, a lot of times the chunks of mead or the chunks of fruit will develop this like a French onion soup thing at the top. It's called a cap, and the CO2 can't get out of the cap, and it gets trapped in there. And so you got to go in there. So also when you're degassing, if you've got a big chunks of fruit at the top, you're also what's called busting the cap every day to make sure that the CO2 can naturally get out of there and not get trapped in there, or you'll end up with this fusel alcohol, very acidic liquid because you're stretching out those yeasts.
Right.
Help those guys.
The fruit cap
they're working
traps
with
heat.
you. Work with them.
Well, that makes sense because they can't get out.
Yeah,
so it's
the
really
fruit cap, yeast will generate heat, so the fruit cap also keeps the yeast too warm, so they express heat shock proteins and they eat off flavors. So,
yep.
I weight down my muslin bags with glass marbles.
That's what we had to have too.
Yep,
Shot glasses, man, they're cheap and heavy.
That's what I used to. Yeah,
Cheap and heavy.
I got a deal.
That's how I do my dry hopping.
Oh yeah.
I got a deal on glass marbles a while ago. I got like 4 pounds of them that I paid like $3 for.
Wow.
They're just a bitch to clean and they're all rolling all over the place. I'm like shot glasses now.
Leave them put them in a muslin bag or a hop sack. Throw them in the dishwasher.
So I'm on slide 10. I'm on slide 10.
You got a detergent though.
Yeah.
It's glass.
Need a bucket, a wine whip,
Some patience.
nutrients, and you don't even need that much patience. I mean, literally, I'm 30 days in the primary, 30 days in the secondary, unpackaged and drinking.
When you add all your nutrients and you do all that stuff, is that all dry? You put that all dry right on top of
Yeah.
your
Now,
meat?
Kurt says.
Somebody did-
Kurt says what you should do is you should put, take a cup or like a measuring cup and pull out some liquid. Put your half teaspoon of each in, mix it up till it dissolves, then put it in. I just throw that shit in.
Okay.
Because then I'm knocking the snot out of it for
and he does
two
the
or
opposite
3
way.
minutes.
You knock the snot out of it.
Well,
then you add it?
see, I degas for a minute, and then while the whip is running with the drill, I shake it down the shaft and let it continue to run. But I want that initial burst of gas off. If you dump it in and then start that drill, you've provided nucleation sites for all that gas that's in there. And it is like Mentos and Diet Coke. And there's no panic in the world like trying to hold your hand over the top of 5 gallons with 20 pounds of honey in it while it's spewing out the sides.
That's why I use a bucket. It gives more space.
I love the bucket.
Little anxiety.
Yeah.
All my primaries in 8-gallon buckets. I think James started using 8-gallon. And it's so much easier.
Yeah.
I
You don't
did
ever.
too. That's what I'm using now.
Yeah, you don't ever worry about a hose blowing off or an airlock having issues.
Nope.
You just,
One time.
forget about it.
I did.
Yep.
Oh, you had a big beer and it was real full. You got like 7 gallons or
No,
something.
I pitched a beer on top of the meat cake and it took off fast.
So tasting mead, we already kind of talked about the four legs of the stool: the sweetness, alcohol, acidity, and tannins or structure. And then the resources. Ken Schramm, The Complete Mead Maker, if you want one book that kind of talks about all the things that I've been talking about here. If you want one article that really does a great job of breaking some of this stuff down for you because I think Ken's book does a really good job of giving you a recipe.
Like a baseline.
Yeah, but it doesn't really give you the ingredients. It doesn't say put in this much DAP, this much ferment K.
Right.
Kurt's article takes that to another level to talk about that in specifics. And if you just put in Kurt Stock, he's got a lot of stuff out there on mead, but if you just put in Kurt Stock Mellow you'll see Mellow for Dummies, and it's right on the BJCP site. And that's my favorite article. If you only looked at one resource, look at Kurt's article, do what he says to do, you will not fuck it up.
Nice.
Tim?
The BJCP Mead Exam Study Guide.
Yeah, I talked about that earlier too.
Has a great section in the back. Recipes, and it's Chris England and Kurt Stock and Gordon Strong and everybody you want to emulate in life.
Once again, all these guys that are the who's who of mead makers in the
Because
country.
he's not it, but you should emulate him.
And So I'll tell you my Gordon Strong story, and then I'll tell you what we're gonna do here with the tasting and stuff. So I'm at the 2012 National Homebrew Conference that was here in Bellevue, and at the dinner, Kurt Stock and his wife are next to me, and Gordon Strong, who is the leading judge in the country, is over on the other side. And the guy that taught Gordon how to brew is from Seattle. So Gordon comes up here, a couple times a year, and he was up here a couple Christmases ago. And I found out he was coming up, and I said, hey, if you guys want to come up, my cellar's wide open, drink beer, drink mead. And I was just starting to get fairly good at these melomels, but I wasn't doing any back sweetening. They were all a little bit acidic. They were all a little bit dry, and I had a raspberry, I had a blackberry, I had a raspberry blackberry, and I was trying to play with my berry berry mix. And he's like, well, do you have any, he's trying them, and he said, do you have any honey marks? Of course, and I brought him a big honey like this, and he scooped it in a spoon, and just kind of, mix it in there, and it takes a little bit to dissolve, and we're talking, and he mixed a little more, and finally he just goes, here, try that. That's really good. He goes, yeah, you've done all the hard work. Now you figure out how to get, because once you get the sweetness, when it dries out, the sweetness will open those berry flavors up and just make them pop. And so we're at the thing, and Kurt made a very apt statement. He goes, I taught Mark everything, and we're drinking. In fact, we're drinking my mead, and we're drinking, and that's the first time I actually had ever met Mike Fairbrother of Moonlight. I didn't know who he was. Gordon just said, hey, Michael's meeting us for dinner, and he's bringing mead. I thought it was his buddy from Seattle. I didn't know it was Fairbrother. I never met him. I knew Fairbrother, I knew Moonlight, but I never actually met him. And Mike's in love with his mead. I'd say he's in lust with his mead. He took one sip of mine, and he'd been drinking his all weekend, and he goes, this is the best mead I've had all weekend.
Oh, nice. Okay. So if you're not using Lavalin, what are you using then? Depends on
I use Lavalin. I use Lavalin. I use the 71B. I use D47. I also use YE sweet mead yeast.
Which is your favorite?
Depends what I'm making.
What have you used the most of?
The YE sweet mead yeast is going to leave more residual sugar, leave more natural residual sugar, and I found that if I put too much honey in, and the yeast just literally just craps out, but leaves the residual sugar, I have a better product than when it goes too dry and I have to back sweeten with raw honey.
So when you back sweeten it, is that like back sweetening it? I mean, you can't do that with beer because it'll just chew up unless you can completely cold crash to the homebrewer.
Let me do this. Let's get.
There's a process.
I'm gonna set up a station here. This is the honey station. Be careful of this rabbitweed because if you smell it, it smells like feet. Now it's kind of interesting if you want to know if you want to know what a honey tastes like. What is it, 10 to 1, Tim?
10 parts water, 1 part honey. Mix it up, taste it. That'll give you a better idea what it tastes like in a mead, and that's what Ken Kava God of Mead Shram told me to do.
So 10 parts honey, 1 part.
10 parts water, 1 part honey.
1 part honey. Okay.
And mix it up.
So this is why we have the toothpicks.
Yeah.
And are these for dead toothpicks by any chance?
Yes.
Okay. Those for dead toothpicks. There's lots of toothpicks here, so don't keep licking and sticking them back.
No double dipping, people.
No double dipping. So you can go in and just kind of pull the thing out. Like I said, be careful of the rabbit weed. Smell that first. The rabbit weed's kind of interesting because if you put it in water, it tastes like marshmallows, or it tastes like marshmallows.
Really?
Which is really funny. So we're coming up with a s'more one or something like that. We're trying to think.
I'm working on a s'more mead.
That'd be good.
I haven't used the rabbit blossom. That's because the rabbit weed because he wants too much for what it is.
Yeah. He ran out of honey and then bought this from somebody else, and then realized that nobody really wanted to buy it. And then, hey, we'll give you a good deal on it. I'm like, I don't know if I can make a whole. So what I'm going to do?
Well, he won't give us a good enough deal on it.
Yeah, correct. So what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to set up a tasting station. So there'll be the honeys here that you can taste, and obviously we only have the most we have like 2 bottles of one, 2 bottles of another, 1 big bottle of this, and a half bottle of this. So just kind of be judicious with your pours. And what I'll do is I'm going to put little stickies here and write what it is. And you guys can go through, and then you can just kind of taste and discuss and, go around. And if you want to talk more about stuff with Tim or I, will be available. As we start this, I can talk. I'll kind of start a discussion with Tim about how to back sweeten, and because if you end up, I'm adding honey. Oh crap, that's too much. Guess what? Can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I have my technique of how I do it, and
You just blend it with a wine or something, though. Is that right?
no. Well, one of the things I do is I will. Can I borrow
You
this?
don't want to do that.
One of the things I will do is the base. I will pull out like a pint glass of the base, and that's the base. That's the base. I know that's where I started. And then what I'll do is I'll pull another maybe half a pint glass out and add honey until it gets to the right, side by side until it gets, oh yeah, that's the one I want. And then that's the base. Then what I'll do is I'll add a cup of honey at a time. Normally I start off with 2 cups, then maybe another half cup, maybe another full cup, depending on where it is, until the big, to the 5 gallons tastes like my end state. And then I still got my base, so I can try that and then try those. And so I use my palate, which
sweeten based off your
correct.
base
You just got to make sure that and it takes a while because you're putting in raw honey. So you throw it into your meat, and literally I'll just be watching TV and I'll put it in and I'll stir it a little bit. Put like a tin foil or something over the top, or you put a lid back on it if you want it. And then just watching TV and come back like 15 minutes later and scoop at the bottom, make sure that honey is dissolved. Maybe take another smaller glass and taste that. Until I get it right. Then I know that at least even if I go over, I went up real close to the edge, and if I went over just by a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't completely overshoot it, and I've also had a problem with I've ended up with honey in the bottom, so the first half of my batch that I bottled was at a different sweetness level because when I got to the bottom, I'm like, oh crap, there's still honey there because it didn't all dissolve.
Sure.
So. So this is
My process for back sweetening is fairly similar to Mark's, but I tend to be a little more anal about adding an amount of honey that I've weighed, and then checking. I've got it figured out, so I've got scales so that I can go up. So I know if I add this many ounces of honey to this volume of mead, it equates to this many ounces of honey in a 5-gallon batch.
Right.
So you're measuring your small.
That's what I would be
scaling
doing.
up to your
Scaling it.
batch.
Yes,
Here's
and
a pint, and then
there are
here's the
formulas
percentage.
out there on the internet you can find that'll help you explain how to do that. For calculations, I tend to convert to metric to do that because 5 gallons of mead is what, 23 liters?
I don't know.
19. That's right. 6 gallons is 23. So
5 gallons of meat is the same as 5 gallons of beer.
right, but I convert over to metric to make it easier for the math. And I've got all this crap in a spreadsheet.
I know.
I've got all this crap in a spreadsheet. I don't remember anything. I don't have to. I'm a computer guy. I don't need to know it all. It's all written down in a spreadsheet. I just plug and chug. That's it.
Okay, these are all still these. And most of them are sack strength, which means they're over 14%.
They'll get you in a sack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've cranked out meads that were 22% alcohol that did not taste fusel at all, just as smooth as silk.
Wow.
You ever do a second pitch, or you get that with
No.
one pitch?
One pitch
That's amazing.
with white yeast, mead yeast, and very staggered nutrient addition, love and care. Yeah, the nutrients is the important thing. I don't use as much as Mark, but I use more than Kurt, but I do use Kurt's ratios of 2 to 1. So, and I do okay.
So yeah, help yourself, guys.
Should we start with the honey part first and then move on?
Yeah.
I would. But you know, do whatever you want to do.
I'm gonna do shots.
There's
All right, ladies.